Good evening. Hope everybody's having a great weekend. Jimmy Cosenza here in Chicago. I got a great story for you tonight you guys are going to love. We're going to talk about this guy here, Butch Petracelli, made member of the Chicago outfit, loyal member of the notorious Wild Bunch crew. Butchie was one of the 14 murders discussed in great detail at the legendary family secrets trial. I'm going to read to you some of the transcripts of Nick Calabrese' testimony. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, please hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. I appreciate all the comments. Now here's the three-headed monster that did an amazing job and prosecuted all the defendants at the family secrets trial. You got Mitch Mars, Gary Shapiro, and the U.S. Attorney himself. Chicago outfit guys despise these guys. Some of the guys like Anthony Twan Doyle and Frank Calabrese were heard on tape talking shit about the FBI and some of the prosecutors. But Mitch Mars, this guy was the one of the best prosecutors in the country. He put away all the outfit bosses. So we're going to start with the transcript. Mr. Calabrese, yesterday we began talking about the homicide of a man named William Petracelli. And to kind of recap where we left off, can you tell us approximately when it was that the murder took place? Answer by Nick Calabrese. A couple days before New Year's Eve, 1980. Question. Now, with respect to Mr. Petracelli, yesterday you mentioned a number of reasons why it was the outfit felt that he had to be murdered. And just to be clear, this was in fact an authorized killing. Nick replied, yes, it was. Now, did it come to your attention that Mr. Petracelli had any sort of party in December of that year he was murdered? Nick replied, yes. Question. And first of all, how did that come to your attention? I don't know where it came from, but it was brought up that well, before you tell me what was brought up, who are the people who would have brought it to your attention? Nick replied, this man here, Angelo LaPetria. And when was it that you learned of this party? Now, what Mitch Mars is asking him is about the big Christmas party that Butchie threw at the Allerton Hotel, downtown Chicago, in the Gold Coast, right off of Lakeshore Drive. Mitch Mars asked him, what did you learn about it? What was it that either Jimmy or Angelo Petria or your brother told you? Nick said that he had a big Christmas party at one of the hotels downtown, and there were supposed to be hookers there, things like that. The prosecutor asked him, did that play a role in anybody's decision-making as to the murder of Butch Petracelli? Nick replied, yes. So that was one reason the outfit bosses killed Butch Petracelli is because he threw a lavish party downtown Chicago, drawing a lot of heat, a lot of attention. That's one of several reasons Butchie was killed. I'll continue with the transcripts. Now, with respect to the murder plan, I think you began testifying yesterday that there was a day selected, but it didn't occur on that particular day. Nick replied, no, it didn't. But let's just briefly review what happened the day that it didn't happen. Where was it that Mr. Petracelli was supposed to show up before he was murdered? Nick replied, well, he was supposed to. There was a club down on 14th Street, almost a block away where we were. He was supposed to go there, and then Angelo was going to send him over to where we were. And what sort of club was it? Mitch Mars asked. Nick replied, it's just a club, I guess, where the guys play cards and stuff. I never was in it, so a social club of some kind? Yeah, something like that. And Angelo was going to send him where? When you say where, when you say we were, who is the we? Nick replied, Jimmy LaPetria, his brother Frank Calabrese, himself, a guy named Frank Santucci, Johnny Apes, and Frankie Furio were outside. And about how far was this location from the social club? Nick replied, about a half a block, a little bit more. So it was walking distance. Yeah. Angelo was to send Petracelli to that location where you were. What sort of place was it? Was it a residence? Nick replied, it was an office, some kind of office or some business. I don't recall seeing anything in that. It was just an office with a desk and a chair. There wasn't much furniture in there. Mitch Mars asked him, and what was to happen when Mr. Petracelli walked into this office space? Nick replied, once he came in, the door would be closed. I had to make sure that the door would be closed. As he got in, they would just tackle him, knock him down, and strangle him. Now, the first time, I think yesterday, you said people inside and outside the office were in contact by walkie-talkies. Nick replied, yes. And the fact that the murder was to occur, were you in the office space? Nick replied, yes. Now, here's the men that were at the club, the men that participated in killing Butch Petracelli that Nick is referring to. Here you got Gerald Scarpelli, member of the Wild Bunch crew. Frank Calabrese, Nick's brother, was there. Frankie Calabrese hated Butch Petracelli. They had a lot of issues, a lot of sit-downs. Frank Calabrese went to Angelo several times to have Butchie killed. Angelo's brother, Jimmy the Lapper, was there as well. Nick obviously was there, the government's informant. Frank Santucci was there. You had Mr. Furio was there, and Johnny the Apes were outside as the lookout. So let's get back to the testimony here. So who was there with you on that first day? Jimmy LaPetria. This guy. My brother, Frank Calabrese. Santucci was there, and Nick himself. And the murder did not take place. No. How did you learn as to what happened? Later, Nick says, his brother told him that the reason it didn't happen is because Petracelli came there with somebody else. Did anybody, do you recall, remember who was Petracelli with? Nick couldn't recall. And why did that disturb the plan? Nick said, well, because he set him down to where we were, he wasn't going to come back. So the person he was with would get suspicious if he didn't come back. So they basically called it off. Yes. How was it decided that there'd be another attempt made on Butch Petracelli's life? I imagine, go ahead. I guess it came from Angelo. Angelo, the lethal boss of the 26th Street crew, gave the green light on Butchie. I remember during the trial, I don't know, it was Junior, I think it was Frank Calabrese on tape, or Nick saying that Angelo told Nick, take out the garbage, talking in code, referring to killing of Petracelli. Did you go back the next day? Nick replied, yes. Where did you go? Same place, at the club, at the office on 14th Street. And who was there? Again, these are the men. Jimmy LaPetria was there. Frank Calabrese, Santucci, Nick, Johnny Apes, Frank Furio were outside communicating with these guys with walkie-talkies. They talked a lot about walkie-talkies and transmitters at the Family Secrets trial. So basically the same group was there the day before. Nick replied, yes. And was the plan the same? Nick replied, the same. What occurred on the second day? The second day that the planned murder was to take place. I don't recall how long we waited. I might have been there half hour or 45 minutes. I'm not sure. And we could see there was a front window. We could see out down by the sidewalk. And I forget if it was myself or somebody else. Here he comes. And sure enough, he came walking, coming inside the door. Nick said he closed the door, and it happened so fast. He was on the ground. I don't remember if we taped his legs or what, but I remember holding him down and my brother choking him. Frank Santucci was there and Jimmy LaPetria. How long did the whole event take? Mitch Mars asked. I don't know. It wasn't long. I can't give a time frame. It wasn't long. Who actually physically killed? I mean, the group of you were holding him down, but who was actually the one that physically strangled Petracelli? Mitch Mars asked. And Nick replied very calmly, never once looking at his brother, who was 10 feet away from him. Nick replied, my brother. Mitch Mars asked him again, who? Nick replied, my brother. Now just imagine seeing Frank Calabrese starting to lose his temper when he's 10 feet away from his own brother who's testifying against him. I will never forget the stare down, the glaring, some of the comments and the way he was acting, to see Frank Calabrese there listening to his brother telling the ladies and gentlemen of the jury that Frank Calabrese strangled Butch Petracelli, and enjoyed it because Frank Calabrese hated Butchie. Back to the transcripts. After Petracelli had been killed at that location, what, if anything, was done with his body? It laid there for a while. My brother left to go get out to find out where his car was parked. Petracelli's car? Yeah, Petracelli's car. He left. He had the keys. Did your brother bring back a vehicle at a spot? Yes. And what happened? He came in. They wrapped the body in a sleeping bag or a blanket, he said. What did you do after it was wrapped up? We had to make sure that there was nobody outside walking. We weren't going to carry it out, but there was a woman walking with her little son down the alley. We waited until she passed us and got away from the area. And when there was one guy, I forget who was on what side, but one of the cars was on the south side, one of the cars was on the north side to keep any traffic from coming through. So when you say that, who's in the vehicle? Johnny Apes is in one. Frankie Furio is in another car, maintaining surveillance. After the murder took place, you mentioned that the body was wrapped up. Who was physically present when that occurred? My brother, myself, Jimmy LaPetria, and Frank Santucci. Nick Calabrese repeatedly said the same men that were involved in Butchie's murder. After this woman and child kind of walked out of the area, what happened? Nick said, then myself and my brother and Frank Santucci picked up the body. The back door was open in the car. It was a 4-door Ford. We carried it out and put it in the back seat with the head facing on the passenger side. And Butch Petracelli is a pretty big guy. Did anybody get in the vehicle with the body? My brother did. And what happened when he got in the car? I don't know what he did in there. I knew he was going to cut his throat, but I don't know if he did anything else because he didn't particularly like Petracelli. There was friction between them. Did this go back to the Tony Borsellino matter? Mitch Mars asked him. I think it was probably that, and it had to do with those sit-downs, what they early on about juice loan customers. And by the way, with respect to those sit-downs, were you ever present at any of those? Nick Calabrese said no. Even though Frank had to go to a lot of sit-downs, Nick wasn't really involved in a lot of those sit-downs. Thank God for Nick. You described them earlier, and I was going to go into it again, but how do you learn what occurred at those sit-downs? From my brother. Now, after the body was put in Petracelli's car, did somebody drive the car away from the area? Yeah, who did that? My brother. Were you in the vehicle? No. Where were you? I was in the same place, at the club, at the office. I stood there. And I believe Frank Furio was Furio that followed my brother to park the car somewhere else and leave the car on the street. What did you do while you were in there? I was just waiting. Just wait a few moments. What occurred next as far as the participation in this? I don't know what time frame, how long it was before my brother came back, but he said, we got to go back to the car. Butch had come with Jerry Scarpelli. He had come with Scarpelli that night, and Scarpelli was at the club with Ange. And who is Jerry Scarpelli? Let's see if I could find a nice guy. Here you go, member of the Wild Bunch. So Scarpelli was physically with your brother when him and Frank Calabrese went to the car. Scarpelli thought he forgot something in the car. I don't know if he physically was there or not. Who was in the car with you? Let's see. I was in my wife's car. Nick Calabrese was in his wife's car. The one without my license plate, blah, blah, blah. We went around, I don't know, maybe off 26th Street, off Cicero. I don't recall the name of the street. It's where my brother had parked the car, Butchie's car. Did any three of you go to Butchie's car? Scarpelli and Frank Calabrese went back to the car. This is a lot here. Angelo LaPetria wanted them to go back to the car to make sure Butchie was dead. Angelo LaPetria told Nick Calabrese that if Scarpelli balks, flatten him. What did you understand flatten him to be? Meant to leave him right there. Kill him and leave him right there. Because when Butch had left, this is the story I'm getting from my brother because Angelo told me. Angelo told Scarpelli that Butch is not coming back. So when Butch and Scarpelli came to the club that day, they sent Butch down the street. Angelo Petria told Scarpelli that Butchie wasn't coming back. So just imagine Scarpelli realizing his good friend's not coming back and he's lucky to be alive. How long was he in there? 10 minutes. Do you recall if he found anything in the vehicle? I don't know if he remembered. We drove back to the club. Goes on. And at one point, Angelo Petri wanted to make sure that Butch Petracelli was dead. So after you told your brother, what did you do? He was driving around. We stopped at some convenience store. I don't remember what. He went inside. He bought 2 cans of lighter fluid. Why? Get to this. So My brother says, go back to the car. It's still open. He was going to be down the street watching for us to go. So Nick Calabrese testified he emptied both cans of lighter fluid. He put some in the back and in the front, and then he took some matches and lit it. His brother started yelling at him, you forgot to roll down the windows. What it had done was blacken the windows, but never caught on fire because there was no oxygen. The government thought that Butch Petracelli was tortured with a blowtorch. Obviously you could see that his mouth here was duct tape. But what really happened was when the guys jumped him, they strangled him, they stabbed him up a few times, and Nick Calabrese said that his brother slit Butchie's throat from ear to ear. I believe, let's see here, with Angelo, because this happened, there are two different things. So these are just some of the transcripts that Nick Calabrese on his testimony. But here, we'll go through this really quick. A quick recap. One of the reasons Butch Petracelli was killed is he threw a big-time Christmas party downtown Chicago at a hotel. I used to party at the Ellerton Hotel. They had all kinds of hookers here. You can just imagine drawing a lot of attention, drawing a lot of heat, pissing off the outfit bosses. Another thing that came up during the trial was that Butch Petracelli would go down to Rush Street with a small army of guys, 15, 20 guys. Tony Borsellino would find out, go out the next night with a bigger crew of guys. They were kind of trying to outdo each other on Rush Street, and that was pissing off the bosses as well. Another reason Butch Petracelli was killed is he was warned repeatedly to back off of 4 of Joe Ferriola's top juice customers. Butchie ignored that and continued to strong arm these guys. Butchie also pulled off a couple unsanctioned, unapproved hits. Another reason Butch Petracelli could have been killed is he owed big-time money to John No Nose DeFranzo and wasn't paying him. Now, Harry Alleman and Butch Petracelli were very close. They did a lot of hits together. They even traveled the country to do hits. They did hits for some of the New York guys. They did hits in Arizona. Both guys from the Taylor Street neighborhood made members of Chicago outfit. And then when Harry went away, some of the people wondered, well, how come Butchie didn't go away? Also, when Harry was away, some of Harry's rackets, some of the income coming in was a little light, was missing, and some of Harry's family and friends weren't getting the envelopes like they were supposed to. So some people believe that's one reason. Another reason that Butch Petracelli was killed, in my opinion, was a combination of all of them. Now you got Angelo the Bull, boss of the 26th Street crew. He was the one that ordered Butch Petracelli to be killed. He's the one that set him up, summoned him to the club, sent him next door where he's jumped by the guys. There's just one of several clubs in the Bridgeport area. Scarpelli, as we mentioned, him, Butch Petracelli were involved in killing the Daubers. He ended up committing suicide in the MCC. Some people think, though, that he was murdered because Frankie Schweitz was on the same floor as Scarpelli was. He came to the club with Butchie the second time, and when Butchie went next door, Angelo told him he's not coming back. He obviously got the message. Angelo Petri also told Frank Calabrese if he balks or goes sideways during the killing of Butch Petracelli, his good friend, to flatten him. Frank Calabrese despised Butch Petracelli and took great pleasure strangling him with a rope, slitting his throat from ear to ear. And after Butch Petracelli was killed, 3 more guys in his crew were killed as well. Jimmy Lapper took part in the Butch Petracelli murder, Angelo Petria's right-hand man. Jimmy LaPetria also took part in the brutal beatdown of Tony Spilatro. Nick Calabrese, the only made member of the Chicago outfit that ever cooperated, testified. He testified to 14 unsolved murders, gave the government information on a dozen or so other unsolved murders, and gave the government and feds who's who of the past, present, and future of the Chicago outfit. His testimony crippled what was left of the Chicago outfit. Santucci again. Santucci, Frankie Furio were part of the crew that killed Butch Petracelli. Johnny Apes, boss at one time, he was the one that ordered Ronnie Jarrett to get killed when Frank Calabrese was in prison. Frank Calabrese wrote a very coded letter to Ronnie Jarrett explaining to him that Butch Petracelli was killed. That's another thing that Nicky Calabrese testifies to. But Johnny Apes was the lookout when they killed Feccarata. Johnny Apes was the lookout when they killed Butch Petracelli. Again, Butch Petracelli, they brutally jumped him, strangled him, stabbed him up, and then slit his throat. Made member of the Wild Bunch and a victim of the Chicago outfit. And then there's how they found him. I think it was like 2 months later, they found his body. It was wrapped up in a sleeping bag or a blanket. He was strangled with a rope, stabbed a few times, and as I mentioned, he had the Calabrese necktie. But this is how they found Butch Petracelli. One of 14 murders, brutal murders that Chicago outfit committed. And here's a favorite photo I have here. You got here's a wedding, a Nick Calabrese's wedding photo. So imagine one night you're at a mob wedding. You're invited to a wedding, or you're standing up to a mob wedding. You're either a family member, friend, or associate. And then a couple months later, you're killing the guy. So here you got Butch Petracelli with his wife sitting next to his boss, his mentor, World War II veteran Rocky and Felice. So here's a photo. You can imagine all the other wise guys that were at Nick Calabrese's wedding. So here's a great photo of Butch Petracelli attending Nick Calabrese's wedding. And then a couple months later, they end up killing him. It's a nice photo of Butch Petracelli's home in Hillside, I believe, western suburb of Chicago. He also had a home in Lake Geneva, not too far from the Abbey Resort, like a lot of other mob guys, mob attorneys live. Butch Petracelli, as we all know, was a member of the Lethal Wild Bunch, led by Harry the Hook Haleman, ended up dying in prison, convicted on a state charge of killing a Union guy. You had Scarpelli, as we talked about, participating in killing the Dalbers, and several other unsolved outfit hits, participating in his good friend Butch Petracelli. Ended up getting killed in the MCC by alleged Frank Calabrese on a suspicious suicide. You got Jimmy I. He just passed away not too long ago on the end. You got Tony Borsellino. He was an op of Butch Petracelli. He ended up getting killed. He was one of the men that took part in the brutal torture and murder of all the burglars that robbed Tony Accardo's house. Then you got Butch Petracelli. Obviously, he was a victim of the Chicago outfit as well. And then you've got Scalise. Scalise is still alive. He was actually seen at the recent Taylor Street Fest. He's old, but still sharp as a tack. Here's my guy Mario, or Skippy, the owner of Mario's Italian lemonade stand. Hands down the best Italian lemonade stand in the country. One of my favorite places to go. This man here was good friends with Joe Ferriola. He actually could have married Ferriola's daughter and eventually became a boss himself. Unfortunately, Joe Ferriola had health issues and his life was cut way too short. God bless Joe Nagel and his family. Skippy, growing up in the Taylor Street area, was also very good friends with Harry Ellman, Butch Petracelli, and others. He was about 10 years younger than them. He told me wonderful stories about those two. He said that Butchie and Harry did not want him enlisting in the army, going to Vietnam. He would refer to the outfit guys, not as outfit guys, not as mob guys, but mustache guys. He told me a story one time he was down in Florida, and Harry and Butchie showed up in suits. And Mario told him, bro, we gotta go to the store and we gotta get you some more casual clothes. So sure enough, he picked out some more casual Miami attire so the guys from Chicago didn't stand out so much. That was a funny story. He also talked about how years ago, this outfit associate, Sammy Sansino, or Sambo, if you will, he was killed, and the FBI automatically thought that Harry Ellman did it. Harry Ellman did it, of course, right? Especially the way he was killed, right? He was like clubbed at that shotgun right in front of his kids, broad daylight, like New York style. It had Harry's MO all over it. But Skippy was Harry and Butch's alibi. He was actually on vacation with these guys way to fucking Idaho. But that was one of over 1,000 unsolved murders. But the government really wanted to stick it to Harry and Butchie, but they never could. But I bring this up because Mario was the alibi. He also said that Harry Ellman was pissed off that they killed Sambo, but he was glad they waited till he went out of town to do it. But he also talks a lot about how Harry Ellman and Butch Petracelli were gearheads. They were always working on a car, work cars especially. He showed me where their club is, right there off Taylor and Racine. But if you are ever in the Taylor Street neighborhood, treat yourself to a nice Italian lemonade. And if you're lucky, you'll get a chance to speak to Mario. He's pretty sociable. His stories are epic. Now, here I'll read a little bit more transcript. There was an occasion where I sat down with my brother and he drafted a letter, printed a letter because Ronnie Jarrett was in jail and he wanted to inform him about what had happened. So Frank Calabrese worded the letter in such a way that only Ronnie would understand. And he put it in the envelope and sealed it and gave it to his lawyer. And that was going to go see, and he was going to go see Ronnie to read the letter. But the letter itself was in code, Mitch Mars asked. Nick Calabrese replied, yes, because he talked about something not the way it happened, but who it was, in such a way that Ronnie would only understand. And speaking the code, you describe a number of code references that you and your brother had between each other of some of the murders. Was there any sort of code or signal with respect to Petracelli that you and your brother used? Nick replied, yes. When they wanted to talk about Petracelli, Nick said he would pinch his cheek. And that's a gesture in Italian that means spaccone, a big shot. Because that's one of the reasons Petracelli was killed, because he was going around on Rush Street, throwing big-time parties, acting like a spaccone, a big shot. And that's the last thing guys like Joe Batters, Joe Ferriola, Sam Carlisi, and Iupa want. They like to keep things quiet. And again, Mitch Mars asked him, was this something just between the two of you? Mitch Mars said, yes. So when they would when Nick Calabrese and Frank Calabrese would ever refer to Butch Petracelli, they would just pinch their left cheek. I'm going to ask you about the murder of a man named Michael Cagnoni. Asked if you had occasion to participate in that homicide. Nick replied, yes, I did. Now we'll stop it right there. That'll be the next story. We'll go into great detail how they killed the trucking executive Michael Cagnoni. They actually blew him up. Now, I already did a show on Mike Cagnoni, and I did a show on Butch Petracelli. So check those guys out. But I wanted to include some of the transcripts. If you guys are interested in these transcripts, please let me know. I know a couple of the guys had some issues with the email. But if you're interested, shoot me an email, and I'll gladly send them to you. But again, this is sadly one of several victims, murders of the Chicago outfit, but that actually got solved. Most of them are unsolved, but it's because of Nick Calabrese, one of the men who participated in the murder. He testified in great detail about the men that were involved, some of the reasons Petracelli was killed, who gave the green light. And I'll never forget when Mitch Mars asked Nick Calabrese 2 times, who was the one that actually strangled Butch Petracelli? Nick Calabrese said, my brother. Cold as ice. Frank Calabrese, his face was turning red. He was foaming at the mouth. I thought for sure Frank Calabrese would lose his temper and attack Nick Calabrese. A lot of times Frankie Calabrese would smile and shake his head. No, sometimes Calabrese would pound his fists on the table. But I think Frankie was more pissed. Frank Calabrese would lose his temper more when Junior was on the stand. That's my story about Butch Petracelli. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Next story, we're going to talk about Michael Cagnoni, and we're going to read some of those transcripts as well. I did a show on Butch Petracelli maybe about a year ago. You guys could check out. Have a great weekend, guys. Ciao.